Hello Booktube and welcome to my bookshelves. So today I'm going to do my March reading wrap-up, and I took part in March Mystery Madness. So a lot of them are mysteries, but the first book I finished in March. I started this end of February, but I finished it in March. It's not a mystery, but it is Stephen King's The Westlands, and this is the third part of his Dark Tower series, which I've not read, but this is the third part, and I've mixed feelings about this book. It continues straight on from the first two books, so you have to read the first two first. And it continues straight on, and it follows the gunslinger, Roland, and as he continues his journey towards the Dark Tower. And we don't know what the Dark Tower is yet, but he has drawn together some companions, a lady in a wheelchair and an ex-drug addict. And in this one, they're joined by a young boy called Jake. Now, the first half of this book is, for me, probably some of the worst traits of Stephen King. It's very stream of consciousness. There's lots of dream sequences from all the characters, lots of symbolism, just lots of stuff. And it goes on a bit, and not much happens apart from a giant robotic bear. There's not much happens for like the first 200 pages of this book, apart from a lot of dreams. Then we get into the second half of the book, and they reach the city of Lud, and that's where you get the best of Stephen King, because that section is superb. It's full of tension, full of action. It's quite linear in its storytelling, and that is some of the best Stephen King's writing. So it's a book of two halves. And then you get to the end. And I have to say, I finished this on the train as we were going to Bath for my book spa. And the reason that's amusing is because the finale of this, try not to give too many spoilers, is they're on a train journey, and the train is not all that it seems. And so the ending, they're in the city of Lud, and they fight through to meet the train, and they're on the train, and then there's all these riddles and sort of strange things happening with the train. And so they agree to place a game of riddles for their lives. And then the book stops there, in possibly the most cliffhanger-ish moment you could. And the book just stops. And Stephen King says, right, that'll do. I'm going to write something else now, and I'll get back to it at some point. And I think he spent the next volume, this volume 4, I think he took like 5 years or a long time before he continued the story. So very frustrating ending. But yeah, it's a good book. If you like Stephen King, then you'll love this book. If you're so with Stephen King, then you'll probably put this down in the first half. But yeah, I'll definitely continue the journey to the Dark Tower, but probably not my... The first half is definitely not my favourite. The second half probably is my favourite. So a mixed review for this one. So my next book is where I started March Mystery Madness, and after a 600-page epic fantasy, I decided to go for something a little bit smaller, and that is Maigret's First Case. Tiny little mystery, as all the Maigrets are. And this is Maigret's first case, but it's not the first book. This is, I think, book 20 in the series. And this is a flashback to Maigret's sort of younger days in the police force. And yeah, charming little book, set in Paris, and Maigret is called to investigate when a gunshot is heard in a house, and he goes to investigate, and the house is owned by the rich owners of some coffee company, and they've got connections to high places, but Maigret won't let it lie, and he investigates and digs up all sorts of past scandals in the family until he finds the culprit. And yeah, charming little book. A very different style to what I'm used to, and although it is such a small book, there's a lot happens, and the action just zip along, and sometimes it jumps so fast that if you're not reading very attentively, then you can sort of skip a sentence and all of a sudden you're in a different place talking to different people. And you really have to concentrate, because it does zip along and change locations quite a lot. But yeah, charming little read. I'll definitely pick up some more Maigrets. Next book I picked up is one of the British Library crime classics, which you know I like, and this one is called Antidote to Venom by Freeman, Wills, Crofts. Now, this intrigued me from the blurb on the back, because this is billed as an inverted murder mystery, in which you know who did it, and then you follow the inspector as he investigates, which I thought was intriguing. And this tells the story of the owner of a Midlands zoo, and in the first half of the book, you sort of follow his sort of downfall, his money worries, his marriage troubles, and then you sort of see where the temptation to murder sort of takes place. And so the first half of the book, you see this man sort of deteriorate, and it's for the era, it's incredibly good psychological study of what draws a man to desperate measures. And in the second half of the book, you're introduced to Inspector French, who investigates, and it's not so much a whodunit, because we know who done it. It's more of a how done it, because again, we're not told how the event takes place. So Inspector French works it all out. Now, this was, for me, a 5-star read up until the final chapter. And Freeman, Wills, Crofts, I believe, is a devoutly religious man. And the final chapter, the murderer, slightly spoilerish, the murderer confesses all of his sins to God and is forgiven and sleeps peacefully. And the final chapter I thought wasn't in keeping with the rest of the book, but it's definitely well worth a read. And yeah, Antidote to Venom by Freeman, Wills, Crofts. I'll definitely try and pick up some more Freeman, Wills, Crofts. So, and the next book I read I thoroughly enjoyed, and that is Death Wears a Mask by Ashley Weaver. This is the second of the Amory Ames series. First one was Murder at the Brightwell, and this is the second, and it is described as an elegant Agatha Christie-esque romp, and so I knew I was going to like it. And it is set in the 1930s, and two socialites, Amory Ames and her husband Milo, are invited to a masked ball because somebody else is worried that there's a jewellery thief on the loose, and they're going to set a trap for them, and unfortunately that leads to murder. And then Amory Ames, with the unwilling help of her husband Milo, investigate. And it is full of Agatha Christie style clues, red herrings, characters, and it's, thoroughly enjoyable. The only thing that stopped me giving this 5 stars is the relationship between Amory and Milo. Their on or off marriage started to wear a little bit thin, and you get whole chapters devoted to them and not the plot. And to be honest, yeah, I didn't really enjoy those sections as much, but I enjoyed the characters and I enjoyed the puzzle. I did guess who the murderer was, which is unusual for me, but I did guess it. But yeah, thoroughly good 4-star read. Now the next book I read for March Mystery Madness is a 5-star read, and this won the CWA Dagger in 2017, and that is The Dry by Jane Harper. Now this is set in Australia during one of the worst droughts that they've had for years, and it is set in a small town of Kiwara. Probably not pronouncing that right, but Kiwara. And a tragic event occurs in which a whole family is killed, and it's an apparent murder-suicide by the husband. And an old friend of the husband comes to town, and he hasn't been there for years and years because of a scandal in the past. But he comes to town and things don't quite add up, and so he starts poking his nose in and investigating, and it's not quite as it seems on the surface. Now this book is amazing. It links 2 separate plots. So you have the current plot of the murder-suicide, and then you go back 20 years and see those characters again as youngsters, and then there's another death that happened 20 years ago, and you sort of see that unfold as the book goes on. And it's told in a series of flashbacks. Now sometimes when you get flashbacks in books, they can be a little bit clunky, but Jane Harper does it so good in this, and you'll just get strange little paragraphs of what happens to the boys sort of 20 years ago, sort of interspersed within the main action, and it doesn't intrude at all, and it's paced so well that you don't feel like it's just been inserted for the sake of, oh, I'm going to tell you about this now. No, it's sort of relevant to the main plot and linked to the main plot, and yeah, and it is just done so well, and the writing is amazing. I mean, this is set in Australia during one of their hottest droughts, and I read this when there was snow falling outside, and yet I still could imagine myself being in this town. So yeah, thoroughly good crime drama, and well deserving all the awards that it won. So yeah, I would definitely recommend picking up The Dry by Jane Harper. And so we go from a 5-star book to one that I was looking forward to, but ended up giving it a 1-star, I'm afraid. I really didn't enjoy it, and that is Fever of the Blood by Oscar de Muriel. This is the second in a series. The first one, Strings of a Murder, I've really enjoyed. They're Victorian crime dramas, and they're sort of gothic in feel. I mean, this one is incredibly gothic. You can tell by the cover. And it is the tale of 2 detectives, one Englishman, one Scottishman, and they are drawn into investigating together, even though they don't like each other. And in the first book, their relationship was charming and funny. In this book, to be honest, it just grated. So you have the straight-laced Englishman who doesn't really want to be in Scotland, and you have a foul-mouthed Scottish detective who believes in ghosts and witches and believes in punching suspects, you know, when interrogating them, and they argue all the time and insult each other, and it just went on and on and on. And it was almost a parody of the good cop, bad cop, odd couple relationship that you get in all the 1980s action films, and and the humour just fell flat for me after a while. So I didn't like the central pairing, which is a huge problem for the book. And then the plot is so absurd. So it's in gothic overload. So you have a lunatic asylum, and one of the inmates kills a nurse and escapes. And then you get witchcraft and curses and ghosts and fortune tellers and poison, and the plot just went from one absurd thing to another, and it just got a little bit silly. And there's no actual detection in this book. You've got no chance of working out who did what, because there is no detection. It is just a sort of YA adventure where they're sort of jumping on trains and getting shot at and poisoned and running around in carriages and chasing people down dark alleys for no apparent reason. And yeah, it just got really, really silly. And the two lead detectives, they are shot, they are poisoned, they are starved to death, they are set on fire, they are frozen, they are... anything you can do to them happens, and yet they still manage to recover, get up and run 20 miles and chase down witches. To be honest, I didn't like it at all, and I won't be continuing. It's a shame, because I really liked the first book, but this one just didn't work for me. And finally, I have probably one of the most original books that I've read for a long, long time, and that is China Mielville's The City in the City. And I got this in my book spa, and then I saw that it was being televised this week on BBC. They're doing a series of it, so The City and the City. So it's a detective book, and a body of a young girl is found dumped, and the detective sort of digs into her past and finds she has links to sort of underground political establishments, revolutionaries, sort of conspiracy theorists, and sort of made a lot of people angry. That's the basic plot of it. But this book is more than the basic plot. So you have two cities, and the murder occurred in one city and the body was found in another city, and so the inspector has to travel between cities. But the two cities occupy the same space and location. So it's like having two cities like East and West Berlin when they were split down the middle. But in this case, they are split, but they are sort of intertwined. So you have one part of one city, I think it's called... there's sort of set in sort of Eastern Europe as well, so the names are slightly confusing. You have one, I think it's called Bezel, and another one called Alaquoma. But you can be on one side of the street and you'll be in one city, you'll be in Bezel. The other side of the street is in Alaquoma. And they have their own language and their own currency and their own fashions and their own technology. And you cannot mix, you cannot cross over the street, basically. So if you are in one city, it is illegal for you to interact with anything from the other city. And you have this strange police force called the Breach, and anyone who breaches is immediately arrested and disappears. So you can see something happening in one city, but if you're not in that city, you're not allowed to see. You have to unsee it. You're not allowed to react. You're not allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to look at it. You have to unsee everything. And so you walk around and you have to blank out half the city, basically. And there are certain checkpoints where you're allowed to travel between cities, but as soon as you're in the other city, then you have to unsee your part of the city. And it's an incredibly original idea and fantastically written, because he doesn't go into a lot of exposition with this. You are thrown straight into the cities and he doesn't explain anything. You have to work out. It takes you like 100 pages before you work out what's really happening with the two cities, and which I think is amazing writing. And you'll get situations where he's looking out of his window and he sees a train going past and realises it's not in a city, so he has to unsee the train. And you think, what do you mean he has to unsee a train? What does that mean? And it's never explained until you get like halfway through the book and you think, oh, I see what that was now. I understand. And yeah, an amazingly original book. Probably, I mean, the detective part of the book is probably not the strongest, but the whole concept of the two cities is, yeah, an astounding piece of work. Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed The City and the City by China Mielville. So that was my that was my March wrap up. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all again in my next video. Thank you for watching.